Chuck, my name is Gary Cobb. I'm one of the prosecutors with the Travis County DA's office. I'm going to ask you some questions. We had not met previous to me coming up and introducing myself. We were speaking to you right when we were taking a break. I think you've spoken on the phone to my co-counsel, Bill Bishop.
Yes, I believe I did.
Early on when we were investigating this case.
I think he called just to make sure my office could assist in obtaining some school records. I think really that was about the gist of our conversation, and I did explain who I was, and he apologized that he had not realized that's who he was talking to. I told him that obviously I didn't think the school would have a problem with it if they sent a subpoena, but if there was, either my assistant or the Attorney General's office would assist.
And you just personally, it was inappropriate for you personally to be involved in this.
Yes, I felt, yes, absolutely.
And I think he understood that, and we all understand that. In that same vein, I want to tell you, I know this is very uncomfortable for you, and I know this has been hard for you and your family, having to deal with that, and I certainly apologize for any kind of inconvenience and pain we put you through in this part of the process. And I think you understand it's nothing personal, it's just part of the investigating case. You are the county attorney, which is kind of our equivalent of being a district attorney, if I understand.
Yes.
You prosecute a variety of cases, correct?
Yes.
Murder cases, sexual assault cases, a little of everything?
Yes.
How long have you been doing that now?
I am in my third term, and I've been with my office since 2002.
Were you an assistant before you became the elected?
Yes. When I started, it was April of 2002, and I ran for office in 2004.
And you, before that, were a police officer, correct?
Yes.
And you were a police officer for how long?
About 6.5, almost 7 years.
And again, you investigated a great variety of cases, is that accurate?
Yes.
Dealt with a great variety of defendants and victims and
Yes.
little everything.
Yes.
You deal with people who are mentally ill?
Yes, I do.
And your husband, until recently, was a police officer also, correct?
Yes.
And he's dealt with some of the same kind of cases you deal with?
Yes.
Let me ask you some stuff about your family. You and your sister grew up in Kansas, is that correct?
My father was career military, so he obviously was stationed several places. So we did not grow up in Kansas, but that is where he retired.
And you have maintained a relationship with your sister and her family? You did up until recently?
Yes.
What kind of parent is your sister?
Well, I initially used to think that she just indulgent, maybe spoiled the kids a little because they did a lot of what they wanted to do. What I would find is that they just didn't have any parent there. Mary moved to Breckenridge, Kenny stayed in Denver or the Denver area, and the kids were left alone a lot. So
not alone in a house by themselves, but with different parents, maybe not around all the time.
Right. Yes, that. I mean, they didn't live in their own house or anything, but no, that's what it was. Is they would really be passed back and forth between their parents.
That's for both kids, right?
Yes.
But they didn't. Brandon Daniel was no more alone than his sister was.
I'm sorry?
Brandon Daniel was no more alone.
Alone. No, I mean, they had each other, yes, certainly.
And it seemed to be that your sister's belief was that you should raise independent kids.
Yes.
Would you say that Brandon Daniel was fairly independent?
I would say that he had to be, yes. Yes.
Strong personality?
Brandon's very smart, and he's very comfortable with being smart, but I don't know that he was very comfortable with asserting himself. I mean, certainly when I would see him, he was always just very quiet and he preferred to stay in the background as opposed to be in the forefront.
Sure.
So,
did that cause you any concerns?
no. I mean, I really thought it was more just like his parents were, although I think Mary is more, he's a more like, I thought he was more like his dad, just kind of reserved, stay in the background. Mary's a little bit more up in front type of person. So.
Both parents were pretty introverted.
Yes.
And Brandon Daniels introverted.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
His sister Sam is also introverted.
She's quiet. Yes.
But nothing that would cause you to have any concern.
No, I mean she just seems like a quiet. She's quiet. She doesn't. Again, she seems just like someone who would rather just kind of be there, not be the one speaking, be the one taking charge, I guess.
With Brandon Daniel, you used the word happy to describe him several times when you talked about him living with you when he was 16, and then when you went to Colorado when he was 21 to visit. Both of those times you described him as being happy.
Yeah.
What do you mean by being happy?
I guess I should say he was very physically happy. I mean, he was smiling. He and Jenna were very playful together. They would giggle. They were always touching each other. I guess that's what I mean. To me, that was happy. And when Brand first came and stayed with me, I think he just seemed really relieved not to be at St. John's, and that he would smile. He and I would. He tried to teach me how to play video games, which I'm not very good at. And so he was a lot more outgoing when he first got there.
And he worked at a McDonald's, is that right?
Yes.
How long did he work at the McDonald's?
I don't think he worked there very long. He got the job probably about a month maybe before he ended up returning back to his mom's house.
And did he participate in school activities?
No. No, he would sometimes stay after school to use their gym, but for the most part, no, he didn't do sports or anything like that.
Did he have a motorcycle when he lived with you?
No.
Did you know that was one of his interests, was riding motorcycles?
Yeah, he's ridden motorbikes since probably about the time he could walk.
Did he ever do anything that made you think he had brain damage?
No.
Okay, and I wasn't trying to shock you with that question. You seemed, by your reaction, kind of surprised by it.
No, I mean, he was smart. He was as smart as he always was. I know that he had an accident when he was younger. I think skateboarding. It was either skateboarding or it was a motorcycle accident, but he had received a concussion, but I don't know of anything from there. No.
He had a skateboarding accident and fell off and hit his head on the concrete.
I believe that's correct, yes.
I mean, I think it was when he was maybe 14, before he came to live with you, right?
Yes, yes.
You knew him before he had the skateboarding accident, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
In fact, the first 6 years of his life, you were probably a constant presence.
Yes.
And then later on, he came and lived with you for a while, but you had interactions with him as when he was 16, after the skateboarding accident.
Yes.
Any changes between when you knew him before the skateboarding accident and when you knew him after the skateboarding accident?
Well, I can tell you that before, obviously, we interacted a lot more. I would see him with his cousins, and he actually was a lot just more outgoing. Still would be considered, I think, introverted by most people's standards. He was very comfortable with family. Let me say that. Or if
comfortable close with family?
Well, with his cousins, and if he knew who you were. He grew up, I think, a lot more in the military. You move around a lot. They were able to be a little more stationary. So he had a circle of friends that he was very comfortable with.
Like male friends that he hung around with?
Yeah, just I think male friends that he rode bikes with, things like that. So he would remind me, I mean, he was just a kid. They'd play, they would make noise. I'd have to come in and say, okay, it's time to go to bed now. And they'd giggle and stay up a little bit. When he was living with me, he did not try to meet anybody. And he didn't even the work, I think he was happy to be working because it was doing something different. But we were never introduced to anybody. He didn't bring anyone home. And prior to Jenna, I didn't even know that he had really been seeing anybody.
Yeah, but that was different when he came to live with you. He was kind of forced to do that, wasn't he?
Not forced to live with me, no.
I mean, to leave Colorado, the home that he had in Colorado, and come to Kansas. Not that that's a great distance away.
We approach her.
Ms. Shepherd, for whatever reason he came to live in Kansas with you, his preference would have been to be back living in Colorado. Is that fair?
Yes.
Not that your home was bad for him. He probably enjoyed being around your family, didn't he?
I think that he enjoyed it for a little bit, but it was probably
Still not home?
stricter. Maybe, but I don't know that Brandon. Maybe, but I don't know that Brandon hated living there. No, but I think that he wanted to be home.
You had rules and regulations, didn't you?
Yes,
How did he do with following your rules and regulations?
he followed them. I didn't have any problems with that. He went to school. I guess other than the alcohol, he didn't follow that rule, that he wasn't allowed to drink. But when he went to work, he walked because he didn't have a valid permit in Kansas. So he would walk, it's about a mile from my house.
But you didn't have any problem with him following your rules and regulations in your home, did you?
No,
Other than the alcohol.
yeah.
Speaking of alcohol, did I understand you to say your sister doesn't seem to like drinking?
She's never been much of a drinker, and I don't think she really ever approved of it.
She had a fairly liberal attitude about marijuana,
Yes.
but she did not approve maybe of alcohol. Did not seem to like alcohol herself, is that correct?
Correct.
Would it be true if somebody described her as being an alcoholic? That surprises you?
I would be surprised. She was a binge drinker when she was younger. She would binge drink a lot, pass out, not touch it again for a very long time. But no, I would not. I mean, that's how I would describe her.
As an adult, as a parent, she was not that kind of drinker.
No, not that I know of, no.
She approved of marijuana, but what about cocaine and those kind of drugs?
I don't know my sister to have done those. Honestly, when she became a yoga instructor, I didn't even think she still did the marijuana. I was wrong because she did, but no, I don't know that of the horrors.
She kind of believes in healthy lifestyle.
Well, I know that, well, yeah, that's what I would have presumed, yes.
And Ken, Brandon Daniel's father, you said he drank, but again, he didn't drink very much.
I have never seen Ken drink excessively.
You've been around him quite a bit, correct?
I've known Kenny since I was 16 years old, so that's when he and my sister got together.
What about, again, with him, cocaine, hard drugs like that?
Yeah, I did know that Ken experimented with that at least. I don't know how involved he became in that, but I do know that there was a point that he probably did.
Again, in his younger years, is that what you're talking about?
I would say, yeah, I mean, I was young, so that's, I don't know exactly how old Kenny is, to be honest with you. So I would have been in my 1920s, so whatever his age would have been at that time.
So when you're talking about experimenting, you're talking about as a teenager maybe, or early 20s, I don't know.
For him, I mean, he's older than I am, but I don't know how much.
But not as an adult, not as a parent, he wasn't doing
Brand would have been born. Brand would have been, I think at that time he would have, because I think I was about 19 or 20 when Brandon was born. But that's, I don't know much beyond that as far as their drug use.
it. You see them as being good and caring parents?
I would not have questioned that they loved their children.
They gave them things that they needed, such as a home to live in,
Yes?
fed them appropriately.
Yes.
No reason to think that they were physically abusing their kids?
No.
Absolutely not, would they?
Not that I know of, no.
Any reason to think that they were sexually abusing their kids?
No.
Now, I'm not saying that to suggest that anybody has said that, but none of that stuff was present in their household, was it?
I did not know of it.
The mother, was she involved in Brandon's schooling, or his education, I should say?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that something important to her?
It was very important to Mary.
She responsive as far as you know to any kind of education needs he had, and trying to keep him on the right track, trying to provide whatever kind of needs he had education-wise.
You know, I do believe initially, yes, she was. There was a point where Brand, I think he was looking at advancing some grades. And it was suggested that he see someone to make sure he was emotionally or mentally able to do that, not just academically able. But I know that when Brandon decided not to finish school, it was not a big deal to her. And that did surprise me.
But he was able to actually finish college, though, right?
He did. He got his GED. He went to work.
And which would seem to suggest that the fact that she didn't think it was a big deal indicated that she knew what her son was capable of, even without being able to finish high school.
Well, she would often say that knowing not what you want to do is almost as good as knowing what you want to do. And so, yeah, she trusted that.
And Ms. Shuck, if you had ever, in the time that you knew Brandon Daniel, you had ever thought he had some kind of psychological issues where he needed a psychiatrist or some kind of counseling like that? First of all, did you ever believe that he needed something like that?
The only time that I had that kind of direct where it was very lengthy was when Brand lived with me. And yes, I thought he was very depressed. Now, I attributed it to being homesick, and I did tell my sister. I asked her, you know, why isn't he home? Why don't you come and get him? And he's very depressed. I can't get him to come out of his room. Something's wrong. And that was when the decision was made to send him back home.
When you say very depressed, was that depressed lonely or depressed mentally ill depressed?
It was more than lonely. I mean, he and I still did things. Would I have opened a care and treatment? No. I mean, as a prosecutor, I can tell you that's not what I was looking for. I didn't feel he was going to hurt himself. But I was concerned that if it went longer, that if he stayed with us longer, that it would get to a point where I couldn't help him. I thought helping him would be sending him back home.
And you did?
Yes.
Now you give me just a second. When did you last have contact with your sister?
What kind of contact?
Phone contact or seeing her in person?
The last,
Communication.
okay, I guess I'm asking, positive contact that I had with her would have been quite some time ago, probably about 6-7 months ago. But she has sent me emails. She, I mean,
Where's she living now?
I believe that, well, she lives in Colorado. That's the last that I know.
Where is she at physically
Uh,
now, today?
oh, I do not know.
Is she here in Austin? Has she been in Austin recently?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I did not even want her to know I was coming here. So I don't know where she is today.
What about Ken?
I believe Ken is here in Austin somewhere. I know that he's been sick. And so,
But he lives in Austin, though.
yes,
He was here for the first couple of days of the trial.
okay.
And his, Brandon Daniel's sister Sam has been here for the trial, correct?
That's my understanding, yes. And I talked to Sam this morning, yes.
You said that your sister had asked you to come into this.
Yes, she did. She wanted me to actually represent Brandon,
Which would not have been very appropriate.
which I told her, yes.
And then the last thing you kind of said was that you kind of blame yourself for this. You feel like you should have done something that would have prevented this from happening.
I feel my sister is not a very friendly person. But I really thought it was directed towards me. All of the things over the years that she said, there has been an estrangement for many years. There will be periods where if she needs something, she will talk to you, and if she doesn't, then she will not. I didn't ever think that that expanded beyond me. When I saw Brandon so depressed when he lived with us, I thought he was homesick. I thought sending him home was the better thing. I found out several things that had occurred that I didn't know.
You found that out from whom?
Well, from Brand's team.
Oh, his defense attorney told you stuff that had happened.
Yes, and then I did confirm those things with Kenny on some of the issues that he actually did confirm.
Did Kenny confirm to you that he was an alcoholic?
No, I never asked him that. I've never heard that. I mean, no one's ever told me that.
Defense team didn't tell you that?
No.
Well, my question to you, though, is what could you have done? You talk about blaming yourself. What could you have done that would have prevented Brandon Daniel from killing that police officer?
If I had been able to get him help when he needed it, if I had been able to give him some rules to follow, some examples to follow, I feel that he would not have been in the position that he was in, or that he ended up in. I just wish I could have done more.
You feel that if you had done more, he would not have taken the Xanax that caused him to kill the officer?
I believe that he never would have taken Xanax. I don't do those things, but I understand that they help with anxiety.
Do you believe that if you had been more involved or had some decision-making capabilities with him, that you would have prevented the brain damage that caused him to kill the officer?
I don't.
I object if the question's argumentative. Also calls for, I don't even know what that question's about.
Yeah, I would assume that's not an objection, and may I continue?
It's not argumentative, my objection.
Objections or?
If I had known he had brain damage, I would have gotten the appropriate medical treatment. If I had known that he had tried to kill himself when he was younger, if I had known that he was so depressed that he would take drugs, I would have gotten him help. That's what I believe I could have done for him.
So, Ms. Shuck, if you had known all the things that you didn't observe, then you would have done something different than what you did, is that?
Yes. Yes.
But you never observed those things that the defense attorneys have told you about, did you?
Just the depression when he was at my house. I mean, he didn't do drugs that I know of, and he wouldn't, I don't know where he would have gotten Xanax or anything like that. if
And
he-
your sister never told you why she sent him to Kansas, did she?
No, just to go to the military school.
And that's a very good military school there, isn't it?
It's been there a long time, yes.
Very expensive to get into, is it?
I'm going to presume it's a private school, so I would presume that it would be more expensive than a public one.
I think the amount I saw was $3,000 and something dollars for the semester.
I don't know.
And your sister went through the application process of getting him into that school?
As far as I know,
Paid the fees to get him in there? They weren't gonna let him go for free, were they?
I would presume not, no.
I got him enrolled in there,
Yes?
and then he went AWOL from the school, didn't he?
Yes.
You're not past witness.
Ms. Shook, Mr. Cobb asked you about Brandon's father being sick. Do you now know that he has cirrhosis of the liver from alcoholism?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that.
If she knew he had cirrhosis of the liver from alcoholism.
Okay.
Also, it's fair to say that a lot of the stuff that you learned about, you weren't present in Colorado when Mary might have been doing other drugs or Ken might have been doing other drugs. Is that correct?
Correct.
So and there was this insinuation that we somehow told you what to say or what to do. Is that the case at all?
No.
In fact, I had to beg and plead to get you to come here, correct?
Yes.
And because your sister was emphatic that you not come and show up.
Yes.
In fact, and the reason that you don't know where Mary is because you don't have any contact with her, do you?
That's correct.
When we talked about things about Brandon's case, some of that was to confirm whether you knew any of this in terms of what you might be able to testify to. Is that right?
Yes.
Many things you didn't know, correct?
Yes.
And couldn't offer an opinion on.
Correct.
And you told me that.
Yes.
And further on.
You visited with Brandon a couple of times, 2 or 3 times?
I think twice. You mean since he's been here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I believe twice.
And you written letters to him?
I have sent him, yes, on his birthday.
Has he written back to you?
No.
He's never responded to your letters?
He has not responded to my letters.
In your communication with him, did he ever express any remorse at having killed Officer Jaime Padron?
We did not discuss that. I mean, we did not discuss it.
Did he ever express to you any remorse for having killed Officer Jaime Padron?
Not to me.
Thank you, ma'am.
No further questions. Thank you. This witness speaks, excuse me.
No objection, Your Honor. That's it. Which one?
Harold.
How are you doing, Dr. Aaron?
Well, I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank
Good.
you for asking. So when we stopped yesterday, the defense attorney had asked you a bunch of questions, and I'll give you a chance to. And I want to thank you, first of all, for letting me borrow your notebook to help me look at things, and also for making that other information available to me. So I just have a few areas I want to cover with you.
Certainly.
Now, Dr. Harold, it wasn't clear to me what your practice actually involved.
Uh-huh.
So can you tell me what it is that your company does?
Certainly. I'll be happy to. In a way, our company is bifurcated in the services that we provide. We do, on the clinical side, we do primarily neuropsychological assessments, and the majority of that work is with a contract that I have with a hospital that I've had since 1990, and we do all their neuropsychological assessments, and they're primarily children and adolescents who have what we call dual diagnoses, or they have multiple types of difficulties. Oftentimes a developmental disorder with some other psychiatric disease or disorder superimposed on that.
Can I stop you just a second?
Yes, sir.
When you talk about doing neuropsychological assessment,
Yes, sir.
can you briefly explain what that means?
Sure, I'd be happy to. A neuropsychological assessment, in a lot of ways, is like test driving the brain. I mean, you're basically looking at different forms of thinking and reasoning and memory and learning, and how well people take in information with their eyes and their ears, their sense of touch, and also how well they coordinate motor activities. And essentially, we're looking at behavior, and from that behavior, we're trying to draw conclusions about strengths and weaknesses of brain function. And so that's essentially what a neuropsychological evaluation is. It's using tests with certain psychometric properties to evaluate those things that we kind of take for granted in terms of those aspects of functioning.
You do written tests for this? Or?
Well, there's actually a whole lot of different types of tests. In any given evaluation, we may administer 14 or 15 different types of tests to evaluate those areas of functioning.
Are all these written tests?
No, sir. No, sir, they're not.
I mean, I don't want to know the specific tests, but what do they involve?
Well, a neuropsychological test, I guess one of the foundational tests that we might administer would be an intelligence test. So that would be one piece of it. Then we would look at other aspects of thinking and reasoning. That might be something that would look at mental flexibility. It would look at certain types of concept formation and problem-solving skills. In addition, we might do an academic assessment, how well people do mathematics or how well they write and read. Then we would look at specific types of memory, and as a neuropsychologist, we break memory down in a lot of different ways, so we would evaluate aspects of memory to determine their functionality and with respect to memory. Most of those tests that I just mentioned would be what you might consider sort of a written type test, although they're not, there's very little on the part of the examinee that they actually have to write. But they're interacting with material that would be, I think, in the spirit of what your question was all about. The other aspects of our evaluation really are not so much written as you're thinking about it. They would be more interactive, or they might be looking at aspects of sensory performance or sensory perception. So that's the other part of what we do. Would you like me to finish the response to the original question?
Other than those kind of assessments?
The original question that's still out there was what my company does.
I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Other than those kind of assessments?
Yes, sir.
Any other kind of testing type things that you do?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I think.
You don't do any kind of brain imaging type stuff?
No.
I don't mean your company, but have it done?
Not really. Usually, the area of my work deals with brain behavior relationships, and as a neuropsychologist, all of the kinds of studies that we would do really have to do with the things I just talked about. What we normally would have is information about a medical history, or we would have information from physicians that would allow us to make that correlation.
Okay.
So that's how we work.
So the short answer is no, you don't do brain imaging,
That's correct. I don't do brain imaging.
and you don't have it done by anybody else.
Not typically, no.
Don't say not particularly, just say.
No, I said not typically.
Oh, not
I mean, with my company, we also have physicians that work for my company, and so occasionally the company will, one of the physicians might order something, but that's not common.
Okay, I understand it's not common, but sometimes if you want a brain imaging done, brain imaging.
Yes, sir.
is done. Okay.
I think in my career, my company's probably been responsible for ordering one or two. Would you like me to continue with the other question that's still out in the open about my company?
Well, if you want to talk any more about the brain imaging, I'll give you a chance to do that.
Well, I've already answered that. It was, I think in all the people that my company's evaluated, I think probably one or two times one of our physicians has ordered a brain scan.
And just so we'll be clear on this, you have never handled a case involving a criminal defendant.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Not ever.
Never.
How many years have you been doing this?
Well, I've been practicing independently since 1985.
Now you can go ahead and talk about the rest of what your company does.
Okay. So on the clinical side, we'll do somewhere on the order of 160 to 300 evaluations a year, and most of it's at the hospital. And it's there where I'm responsible for working with graduate students who are learning how to administer tests and write up the test results and that sort of thing. Then the company also does what's referred to as medical legal consultation. And in the work that I do, unlike a criminal case, would be to evaluate a catastrophic event. So that might be a severe traumatic brain injury, or it might be a spinal cord injury or some other chronic disability. And we use physician consultation for that side of the company. And what we end up doing is trying to evaluate a person's needs with respect to medical and medically related goods and services because of the disability that they have.
And that's for people with traumatic brain injury?
Mostly, although we do all kinds of disabilities. We do spinal cord injury, burns, amputations, birth injuries.
Let's just talk about the traumatic brain injury.
Yes, sir.
And can you define what traumatic brain injury means?
Yes. While there's a number of definitions that are out in the literature, it's typically, I think I actually mentioned this yesterday, a traumatic brain injury is defined as a blunt force trauma to the head. And the blunt force trauma results in a contemporaneous alteration in mental status. And what that means is that there's typically a change in their capacity to remember for events immediately preceding and immediately after that blunt force trauma. And it's graded. We typically use a very coarse grading system of mild, moderate, or severe. Concussion is considered a mild traumatic brain injury.
Mild traumatic brain injury.
That's right.
Any kind of would you expect there to be any kind of long-term consequences of that kind of brain injury?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, probably the most largely distributed medical journal in the world is a journal called JAMA. Last month, one of the key articles that JAMA published was an article that had a longitudinal study of over 800,000 individuals who had sustained a traumatic brain injury, defined as anything that resulted in an alteration in mental status for 1 hour or more. And in this particular case with Brandon, I'm not through with my response.
This particular case?
Okay, I'll restrict my response to the journal. What they discovered in this longitudinal case of over 800,000 individuals who had sustained an injury is that their rate of suicide was 3 times that of the general population, and their comorbid problems, primarily with depression and substance abuse, was greater than 4 times the general population. So what the argument was in that longitudinal study was that we have to look at concussive events like epilepsy or diabetes as chronic conditions, and the comorbid problems relative to a concussion really are depression, substance abuse, and risk for suicide.
That's it?
Yes, sir.
So now, when you're talking about what is that term, traumatic brain injury,
Yes, sir.
the lowest scale is somebody who once had a concussion, is that correct?
I didn't define it that way. The lowest scale is mild traumatic brain injury.
Is mild traumatic brain injury a concussion?
A concussion is considered a mild traumatic brain injury, yes, sir.
And you thought that was different than what I asked you?
Well, I don't mean to split hairs, but for us it can be concussion, and it could be
Let me
something
ask you this,
that...
Doctor. Let me ask you this.
Well,
What's the best way to determine if someone has brain damage? The best way?
well, the way that
What's the best way?
would you like me to respond?
I want you to answer my question.
I'm trying
What
to.
is the best
Mr.
way?
Cobb badgering the witness and not allowing them to answer his question. He's cutting him off in mid-answer.
The question is, what is the best way to make that determination?
Yes, Your Honor.
So we need to give the witness an opportunity to answer that question.
When we're talking about a mild traumatic brain injury, the best way to make that determination is examining behavior and their mental status. In fact, the definition is defined as an alteration in mental status surrounding an event that was a blunt force trauma to the head. Most people who have a concussion, most people who have a mild traumatic brain injury will have negative scans on their brains, and most of their neurological examination will be normal. And that's why observing the behavior around contemporaneous with that blunt force trauma to the head is part of the definition. That's how we define it.
For a traumatic brain injury,
That's what we're talking about here. Yes, sir.
so if someone has traumatic brain injury, there's no need to do a scan, because even a scan that shows nothing doesn't have any meaning.
I'm being serious in my response, sir, and I think you're being somewhat cavalier. I'm trying to we're talking about a mild traumatic brain injury. If someone has a severe traumatic brain injury, it is incumbent upon the emergency room workers to make sure that they examine the brain for potential complications such as a bleed, because that becomes part of the management of that. But in terms of if someone were to walk into an ER with an altered mental status, it would be incumbent upon those individuals to examine him from an imaging standpoint. They would administer, as part of their emergency medical care, a brain scan. Retrospectively, it's really a conversation about an alteration in mental status. I think we're talking maybe around each other on that score.
So let me make sure I'm clear on this. When did you first meet with Brandon Daniels?
My first contact was on the 3rd of January.
January 3rd. And where did you meet him at?
I met him at the jail.
And who set up that meeting?
I just went down there. I went there myself.
Just a private citizen in Travis County who decided?
No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what your intent of the question was.
You should not be concerned about my intent, sir. You should just answer my question.
Well, I did answer your question.
Once again, Mr. Cobb is badgering the witness. He's trying to answer the question.
My
I
question,
think when we think of leave the sidebar and on out, be direct with our questions and answers.
My question to you was, who set up the meeting?
Well, I tried to answer in the best way I knew how. I actually just went to the jail. Now, prior to me going there, I think there was a lot of things that happened. There was a discussion about, I got approved by the court to go do that. I had a letter from a sheriff.
Would it be fair to say the defense attorney set up the meeting for you to go meet with their client?
Well, they didn't, I think they allowed, I think they basically arranged for the legal permission for me to do that. Yes, sir.
How did you get involved in this case? I mean, I understood you to say that you saw a news story and you wondered how something, trying to make sense out of something senseless, I think is how you described it, Dr. Harrell.
That I did not, I think that's precisely what I said about why I was interested in doing this. Well, how I got involved, I was contacted by a colleague, and he asked as a personal favor if I would do that.
What colleague contacted you?
Dr. Cecil Reynolds.
Contacted you and asked you to get involved in the case?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do next? How did you get involved in the case?
As I recall it, most of my contact initially was with Dr. Reynolds, but and I ultimately met with defense counsel.
And they explained to you that they needed you to go talk to him and see if he had brain damage?
I don't think they framed it that way.
How did they frame it?
As I recall it, they basically wanted to know, they had already reviewed the history, and they wanted to know if the facts of Mr. Daniel's life may have caused some problem with brain function, and they wanted me to evaluate that question.
Well, but you could answer that question just by looking at that incident where he fell off the skateboard, correct?
Partly, yes, I think I could, but it's always important to at least interview the patient, see them with your own eyes, and independently review the record, which is what I attempted to do.
There was a previous witness who testified that people who are charged with criminal offenses sometimes have a personal bias themselves in presenting a story to people interviewing them. Do you agree with that?
You know, I would ask that you repeat that for me so that I make sure that I understand what you're asking.
A witness testified earlier that in criminal cases, I know you don't deal with criminal cases.
Yes, sir.
But someone who's accused of a crime has a self-interested, I think that was the term, self-interested bias in how they present themselves to interviewers. Do you agree with that?
I would be a little bit more general in my assessment of that. I think all of us do that. But it's probably true in my career. When I'm interviewing someone, they have an interest in portraying in a particular light to a degree. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm talking about criminal defendants. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about other people you've interviewed. I'm talking about criminal defendants.
But you asked if I believe that that was a true statement. And
the answer is yes?
I think so, to a degree.
When you met with Brandon Daniel, did he understand that you were here to help him with his defense?
You know, I think he knew that the defense attorney had retained me. I'm not sure my role was clear for either one of us when I first met him.
So you don't think he knew that you were there to help him?
Well, he may have perceived that.
Which would have been accurate?
Well, actually, at the first interview, I hadn't committed to doing much yet. I really hadn't. It took a while for me to get to know Brandon before I was willing to take the case on.
Other than the smell test that you did, did you do any other kind of scientific test?
Well, I did a neurobehavioral examination, but I didn't administer any other tests, no, sir.
You never requested that a brain scan be done, did you?
No, that wouldn't be something that I could personally
Did you
request.
request that a brain damage scan be done?
Of course not, no.
You say, of course not. You absolutely could have requested that be done, couldn't you?
Well, it's not within my purview to prescribe for that diagnostic test to be done.
You could have requested the defense attorney, you're part of the defense team, that in order to determine if there's brain damage present in your client, you can ask to have the brain scan imaging done, correct?
It's possible.
Correct?
It's
Yes.
possible.
You didn't do that, or did you?
No, I didn't.
But you were aware, Dr. Harrell, that immediately after the falling off the skateboard incident, when he was taken to the doctor by his sister and his father, that the hospital did do a brain scan,
That's correct.
and they found no damage.
That's an inference you're drawing.
That's what they said in their medical diagnosis.
That's actually not correct. The brain scan was normal.
Okay,
And-
the brain scan was normal.
Brain scan was normal. Now, the resolution of brain scans, frankly, is not at the level that we can identify brain injury with a concussion or a mild traumatic brain injury. The vast majority of individuals who sustain that type of injury, they're not able to see that on our current imaging technology.
Brain scan was normal.
That's right.
And after the skateboarding accident, you're aware that the doctor spoke to Mr. Daniel, who was there with his son,
Yes,
and they told him they had a family camping trip planned. You recall that?
I do.
And the doctor told him, don't take him on the family camping trip. Stay there, keep him at home.
That's right.
Do you have any reason to believe that didn't happen?
I have no idea. I don't have any reason to believe one way or the other.
As far as you know, Mr. Daniel followed the doctor's instructions.
What we do know,
As far as you know, Mr. Daniel followed the doctor's instructions. Do you have any reason to believe otherwise?
I am not
Do you have any reason to believe otherwise?
I am not aware that he followed up with neurological evaluation as recommended by the ER doctor.
So you don't know.
I didn't see evidence of it.
How long did you meet with Brandon Daniel the first time?
2 hours
And then when did you meet with him the second time?
at the jail.
When did you meet with him?
Oh, excuse me. Well, I don't know. I have to go. I don't have the log for that. And my second interview was about 2 weeks later. I know I tried to see him another time, but he was occupied and I was unable to see him. I think it was 2 weeks later.
So the first one was when?
It was the 3rd of January,
3rd of January. The second one would be sometime right in the middle of January. No matter.
middle or late part of January. Yes, sir.
Then you met him again after that?
I did.
When did you meet him after that, if you know?
The 3rd of February.
Was that the last meeting or was that another one?
I saw him during the course of this trial,
When did you see him?
3 days ago, I believe.
How long did you meet him at that time?
About 30 minutes.
And you told, I think, 2 hours the first time,
Yes, sir.
2 hours the second time,
About an hour and a half the second time.
and the third time?
About an hour and a half.
So 5.5 hours, 6 hours?
About that, yes, sir.
Did you have any problem communicating with him?
No, sir.
He's pretty intelligent, isn't
He's as intelligent as anybody in this room.
he? To be honest with you, he might be the most intelligent person in this room. No offense to either you or the judge. I mean, when he went to St. Michael, his IQ graded out at 132.
He's in the superior range.
Yeah. So I wasn't being glib when I say he very well may be the smartest person in this courtroom. I don't know what yours is. He's way above my IQ. But he's not just smart, he's very, very intelligent.
I think he is, yes, sir.
you state that he has frontal lobe damage, is that accurate?
That's an inference I'm drawing from his history and from some of the behavior that I observed.
Your inference may be incorrect, is that fair to say?
I don't think it is, but I mean, anything's possible.
I understand you don't think it is.
Mhm.
I can say I think it is, and we can argue about what we think,
Mhm.
but your inference about him having frontal lobe damage could be incorrect.
It's possible.
Because most of what you base your inference on is information provided to you by the defendant.
Well, all the medical records I had available to me was brought to me by the defense. I mean,
No,
of
no,
course
no.
that's
I'm sorry.
correct.
Maybe you misunderstood me. It was provided to you by the defendant, not the defendant's team, but the defendant is one who provided you the information that allows you to make that reference, that inference, that he has frontal lobe damage.
I don't think I would really agree with that assertion you're making.
You would not agree with the assertion I just made?
No, sir. I had over 10,000 pages of records to review, including medical records. The fact of multiple concussive events and the comorbid difficulties that Brandon struggled with led me to the conclusion that he had brain injury. And it wasn't what Brandon was telling me exclusively. It was all of those things that I had available to me that led me to the conclusions that I came to.
So the medical record you have showing that after he bumped his head after the skating incident and the brain scan showed no damage, that led you to believe he had frontal lobe damage from that incident?
That and the prior concussions, yes, sir.
Oh, right, the concussion that occurred when he was 18 months old?
Yes,
Is that the one
and
you're talking
again when he was a little younger riding a bicycle, yes, sir.
about? So he had a concussion when he was 18 months old, and the information you relied on that he had a concussion when he was 18 months old came solely from Brandon Daniels.
Yes, sir, it did.
There was no second source to it?
Actually, let me just refer to my notes if you don't mind.
I don't mind. In fact, I'm glad you are, because yesterday you said there was a second source, and I couldn't find it in your notes.
I'm sorry?
Yesterday you testified that there was a second source about the 18-month concussion, and I looked and I couldn't find it.
Okay. There may not have been. I can't tell from my notes. The written note that I have just said from 18 to 24 months, maybe up to the age of 3, he hit his head really hard on a bathtub and was taken to the ER.
I know what your notes says.
I may have gotten that just exclusively from Brandon. As I sit here right now, I can't tell you.
Because you did not contact his mother, did you?
I did not.
You did not contact his father.
I did not.
You did not contact his sister.
No, sir.
You did not contact his aunt.
No.
So you relied on Brandon Daniel for the 18-month, I had a concussion because I fell in the bathtub.
That's correct.
And there was a third concussion that you talked about? The
He-
falling off a bike at 3 years old?
No. Brandon could not give me a date of when this occurred, but it was sometime before he reached middle school. He was riding a bicycle and ran into a parked car, and it was associated with a bruise and laceration to the head and being briefly knocked out.
That's the third concussion, right?
Yes.
And Brandon Daniel was the one who told you about that?
Yes, sir.
You didn't talk to his mother?
No.
You didn't talk to his father?
No, sir.
You didn't talk to his sister?
No, sir.
You didn't talk to his aunt?
No.
Does Brandon Daniel's mother, is she an alcoholic?
My understanding is that both his mother and father struggle with substance abuse disorders. Yes, sir.
That is, they were alcoholics and drug abusers.
I haven't met with them, so I can't make that diagnosis based on what I learned from Brandon. I think you could say that they struggled with substance abuse. the extent of which I don't have any personal knowledge of.
But Brandon Daniels told you that they were alcoholics and drug abusers.
I don't think he used those terms.
Those are the terms that are in your report.
Well, I didn't write a report for this, but those are in my notes. But that's how I would interpret what he told me. I don't think he said those words.
But that's what you would interpret.
Yes, sir.
Alcoholics and drug abusers.
Well, we don't. I think they're both substance abusers. Yes, sir.
And that's pretty clear from how he described them, correct?
Yes, sir.
You think that had an effect on you?
I think it absolutely did.
Like a negative effect, it would cause him to be a different kind of person than he would have been if he had not been raised in that kind of environment.
Yes, I think that's probably fair to say.
What if he lied to you about that?
Well, what if he did? I don't know. I don't know what the
Would that change your opinion on what caused him to kill Officer Jaime Padron?
I don't know that I've made any assertion one way or the other as to why he killed Officer Padron.
Why do you think he did?
I think there's a confluence of factors that from a retrospective standpoint, we can understand what happened. But there's no doubt from your records, from all the records that I had available for review, that he was so heavily under the influence and he had a long history of impulsive behavior because of a lot of different factors. I think I can understand it, but I'll never be able to look into the black box of anyone's mind or soul and be able to say with certainty.
So the combination that caused him to kill Officer Jaime Padron, the Xanax, certainly was part of it, correct?
Yes.
And his parents, alcoholic and drug abusing parents, played some role in that.
Yes.
And the concussions that caused him to have frontal lobe damage and traumatic brain injury, that played a role in it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did his breakup with Jenna, did that play a role in it?
It seemed that it probably exacerbated his experience of depression. Yes, sir.
Because he was already depressed, and he's been depressed all of his life.
Yes, sir.
And breaking up with Jenna kind of put him in what somebody calls a downward spiral.
I think that's a fair statement.
And what about his relationship with Nikki Nance? Did that also contribute to?
I can't say.
Did his parents, would you consider them to be good parents or bad parents based on what he's telling you?
I think they struggled with their own problems and that interfered with their capacity for parenting in an effective way.
Based on what he told you, did his mom seem like she was somebody who was involved in his education?
I think she probably promoted him in terms of pushing for an education. But I think there certainly were ways in which she was not available to him.
Does that seem close to you, based on what he's described to you?
No.
Not a close relationship?
No.
Did you get to listen to the audio tapes of conversations between your client and his mother?
No.
Would that have helped you perhaps understand better the relationship?
Not that question that you're asking me to entertain. In some ways is peripheral to the work that I did in this case. So I'm not sure that it would have helped me with what I did in this case. I'm not sure it would be helpful to me.
Would it be fair to say you weren't really looking to test any of the things he was telling you about his background?
I don't know that that's a fair statement. Whenever we interview anyone, we have a professional skepticism about what they're saying, and we try to evaluate that as objectively as we can. We try to relate it to the history as we come to know it from multiple sources. And it's through that process that we come to clinical conclusions. So I'm not entirely certain I agree with the assertion you were making.
Well, he asserted that he had bumped his head at 18 months old and got a concussion, and you accepted that as being true and didn't bother checking with a single other source, did you?
Well, Dan,
Did you check with
Brett,
another source?
well, there's
Did
two.
you check with another source?
The,
Did you?
you've asked two questions of me.
The prosecutor will not allow him to answer the question. I have interrupted him 3 times. I've asked the board to instruct the prosecutor to allow the witness to answer the question he's asked.
You're so instructed, let me answer.
You've asked me two questions as I hear your question. One was whether or not Brandon represented that he had a concussion at the age of 2. And the other was, did I check with any other source? On the first, as I understand your question, Brandon did not represent to me that he had had a concussion. He was, as part of his history, talking to me, he indicated that the lore in his family was that at a very young age, he had hit his head and that he was taken to the hospital. The second part of your question, as I understood your question, was whether or not I checked with another source. I don't think I did.
No, you didn't. I mean, that's the true answer. You did not.
I don't think I did.
So you accepted what he told you as being true without checking to see if it was true. That's the correct answer, isn't it?
Well, I didn't have a collateral source for that. That's true.
That is, you didn't have a phone number for his mother?
Well, actually, I didn't, but that's immaterial. I didn't bother to call his mother.
And you could have.
Probably could have.
Could have called his father.
Probably could have.
When he told you that they were alcoholics and drug abusers, you could have called them to ask if they were alcoholics and drug abusers, correct?
Could have, yes, sir.
You didn't bother doing that, did you?
No.
So again, he told you something, he was the source of it, and you found no evidence other than relying on what he told you.
That's true. Well, for the conclusion that his parents were substance users? Is that your question?
Yeah.
That's true.
Just because somebody is impulsive, that doesn't mean that they can't control their behavior, does it?
No, it means they have difficulty controlling their behavior.
So if somebody has an impulse to commit an act of violence, they know that they shouldn't do that. Is that correct?
Retrospectively, absolutely. You're correct.
Do you think that someone who has an impulse to commit an act of violence doesn't realize that it's wrong to commit an act of violence?
No, I don't think that's true. I don't think they have control of their ability at the time the act of violence is committed.
They can't help themselves. They're going to do it because they have that impulse to do it.
For someone that carries a diagnosis of impulse control disorder, yes, sir.
Do you understand that you say you never asked Brandon Daniel if he was depressed?
I don't think that's a fair statement. I mean, we talked about a lot of things. I think that what I related yesterday was that when you ask directly, how are you feeling, what's going on, are you depressed, he tends to deny it. But if you ask about symptoms of depression, he endorses them. And then once I got to know Brandon, he was able to share a little bit more with me and was a little more open about his emotional state in terms of feelings of sadness and depression.
Did you ask him if he was depressed?
I did.
And what was his answer to the question of are you depressed?
The very first time I asked it, it was no.
Okay, so you asked him in the jail if he was depressed, and he said no.
Yes.
Did I understand you to say, maybe I'm getting you mixed up with another expert, to say that Brandon did not develop friendships as he was growing up, did not have friends?
I don't think I said that.
And I apologize, I'm going to get you mixed up with someone else. What did Brandon Daniel tell you about what happened at that Walmart?
Really not much. I didn't, I'm not sure I explored the particulars of the crime.
So in your almost 6 hours of speaking with him, you didn't ask him about the murder that he committed?
The fact that of the murder, I did talk to him about. It was very clear to me from the very beginning that there was nothing I was going to have to say about the fact of that event occurring. So I didn't explore the recollections of that. I had a transcript of an interview that occurred right after, basically in the hours following the accident itself. There was a very extensive collateral source for the information about the event, which I relied upon to get my information about what happened.
In testing whether the frontal lobe damage had some effect on what he did, you didn't feel the need to ask him questions about what he did?
Actually, whatever he had to say would have no bearing on that question of whether or not there is the prefrontal cortex was involved in all of that. His statement about that would have no bearing on answering that question.
Was it clear to you that he knew that he killed a police officer?
At what point in time?
Any point in time?
Well, when I'm talking to him several years after the fact, that he was absolutely clear he had killed a police officer.
And he intended to do it?
What do you mean by that? Because that might mean something different to me than it does to you.
Well, that he pointed a gun at the police officer, intending to kill a police officer. He pulled the trigger of the gun. That's what I mean by intended to do it. It wasn't accidental.
The fact of the deaths is not really a question here, is it?
Yeah, it is.
That's been decided, hasn't it?
Well, but still, there's an issue about someone's intent and what made them do it. And if you're saying that this brain damage somehow made him unable to understand that he was killing a police officer when he pulled that trigger, that's very important.
I never took it to the level that you're taking it. And I think that's a misrepresentation of what I've said.
So you're not saying that the brain damage caused him to do it? Are you?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
So that all the stuff about brain damage we talked about really has been irrelevant?
Absolutely it's relevant. It's relevant because the fact that he had multiple concussions at critical phases of his development, and the fact that those events occurred, they are known to cause injury to the brain, irrespective of whether or not you can identify that on imaging studies. It predisposes him to have struggles with depression, suicidal ideation, and drug use, substance abuse. Those are the comorbid conditions of a person who's had multiple concussive events. Is that evident in Brandon Daniels' case? Yes, it is. It's evident in, I'm still answering my
question for you, so
Clerk, once again, the witness is answering the question, and Mr. Collins has 7 minutes.
there was no question?
The witness can complete his answer. I don't know that he was finished.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
And what I have said, and I think I've been very consistent in what I've said, is a confluence of factors. I think those early events set the stage for him to struggle lifelong with depression and substance use, and because of the family of origin that he came from, that was a problem that he had. And it's very clear from all the records that when the act occurred, the senseless act occurred, that he was so grossly under the influence of Xanax that all of those things led to why we are all here today. I've never, ever once said that a concussive event caused Mr. Padron's death. It's this confluence of factors, in my mind, in my opinion, that explain what happened, or that help explain what happened. Now I'm through with my answer.
So when you saw the interview that he did with the police, did you think that his recollection of what had happened was accurate? Brandon Daniels' recollection was accurate?
He wasn't accurate.
So
Through the course of the interview, there were.
You understand my question to you? It's simple.
Maybe I
Do you
didn't.
believe his recollection of that?
No.
But that's what you relied on, though, correct? I mean, you never asked him when he was in your office. what happened.
He's never been in my office.
When you never asked him when you were in jail interviewing him for 6 hours, you never said, Brandon, tell me what you remember about what was going on that day that you killed that police officer. You never did that, did you?
No, I asked, I don't recall asking it like that. I was not seeking that information from Brandon.
How did you ask him?
Well, mostly for understanding events as he approached that day, and I used the collateral sources to help fill in the gaps.
I'm interested in how you asked him about what he did that day. How did you ask him that?
I don't remember exactly how I asked him that.
Because you didn't ask him that, did you? You in no manner or form asked him what he did that day, did you?
I don't think that's true.
Well, what's true? Tell me how you asked him.
Well,
Just tell me how you asked him. That's all
Your
I'm
Honor,
asking
again,
you.
the prosecutor asked him a question. Before he can answer the question, he changed the question. This needs to be question and answer instead of Mr. Cobb badgering the witness.
My question is simple. Tell me how you asked him about what went on that day.
I don't recall precisely how I asked the question.
Generally, in any way, tell me how you asked him about what he did that day. That's all I'm asking you. If you didn't ask him that, just tell the truth and say you didn't ask him because you had no interest in hearing what he had to say about it.
What I typically would do, and what I think I did in this case, is I asked generally if he understood what the circumstance of my being there and what the circumstance of him being incarcerated was, and he relayed his understanding of that to me. And what he relayed to me was that he had been abusing Xanax and that he went into the Walmart to steal some groceries, was pursued, he carried a gun with him, and he shot an officer. But I don't have any real specifics about how I asked that question. I don't transcribe my notes that way. But so I apologize for me being maybe not as specific as you would like, but that's how the exchange went between us.
Well, I understand why you're not as specific. Even though this is the first time you ever handled a criminal case, so this is not how you normally do it, correct?
Normally do what? My interview didn't deviate from how I normally would interview.
Right, you didn't treat it as if it was any different. You handled it like you do the civil cases that you normally handle, correct?
I think that's generally a fair statement.
And you didn't take into account at all that someone facing the death penalty or life in prison might have some kind of motivation to lie to you, did you?
Well, actually, I did take that into consideration. What I indicated earlier, you have to have a degree of professional skepticism when you're interviewing anyone. The stakes here are a lot higher, and I recognize that. So my index of suspicion was a little bit higher myself.
Is Brandon Daniel able to control his impulses?
I think his history is very clear. He's had difficulties with that. He struggled with that all of his life.
Did you hear my question? Is Brandon Daniel able to control his impulses? Yes or no?
Your Honor, the prosecutor cannot dictate the form of the witness's answer. What is he trying to answer? Mr. Rob is trying to tell him not to answer.
Well,
Is he able to control his impulses? Yes, he can, or no, he can't.
Again, the prosecutor can't dictate the answer the witness is going to give.
I think the witness is able to say if it's not a yes or no question that he cannot answer that way. That is certainly available to the witness.
Thank you for clarifying that for me, because that's what I was struggling with. I don't believe it's a yes or no question, and I can't really respond in a yes or no fashion. What we can talk about is a normative response. relative to the larger population, it's very clear Brandon does not control his impulses as well as the majority of people. He struggles with that, and I think his history shows that he struggled with that all of his life.
So sometimes he can, sometimes he can't. Is that accurate?
Generally, I think that's generally fair.
Do you think him killing that officer was a lack of impulse control?
No, I think it was a drug-related problem. He was, if you or I had the amount of Xanax in our system that he had, I'm not sure we would be waking up the next day. He was drug-addled, and he had a lifelong struggle with depression, and he had multiple concussive events. And
Don't forget the parents.
That's part of the context of his life.
The drug and alcohol, drug addicted and alcoholic parents, right?
Certainly drug-using parents.
Use of drugs and alcohol, they don't make you a different person, do they? They're disinhibitors, right?
That's right. They disinhibit you, and some people can be perfectly fine and easy to interact with, and when they imbibe in alcohol or drugs, become belligerent and rude. Some people become violent.
But it doesn't make a person who's not violent a violent person. It's just, if you're inclined to be violent, you understand the controls on that, you shouldn't do that, but if you have one of these disinhibitors, it removes that control in your mind and you go do the things you want to do.
I don't think it's exclusively that. I think it's what you portrayed is absolutely something that we see all the time, but we also see people act in ways that are completely atypical.
What I said is correct.
It's not the whole story, but I think I wouldn't disagree with what you said, except to the extent that.
Excuse me, I don't have another question.
Well,
no, you answer my question.
Okay.
And Brandon Daniel had a long history of drug use, is that correct? Drug abuse.
Yes, he did.
And in fact, he had been using Xanax since about maybe late February, late January, early February.
Yes, sir.
But before that, he was already using cocaine and mushrooms, PCP, and a whole host of drugs.
Absolutely.
Do you know how much alcohol he used on the night that he killed Officer Heinrich Jones?
No, sir, I don't.
Do you think alcohol use on that night was important? Could that have been a contributing factor?
It could have been.
But you don't know if he used alcohol at that?
I don't have any personal knowledge of it.
You didn't investigate that?
No.
Did you watch the video of the defendant in the police car as he was being transported from the Walmart to the police station?
No, sir.
Were you not interested in seeing what his condition was most immediately after he killed the officer?
I had a transcript, and I just looked at that. Again, that wasn't. I didn't see that as part of my role here.
You didn't see what condition he was immediately after he had killed the officer as being part of your role?
No, that wasn't the. I have a very circumscribed.
Your answer is no?
That's right.
Brandon Daniel, even with his lack of impulse control, knows the difference between right and wrong, correct?
Yes.
He's not insane, is he?
I'm not sure what that means from your point of view. He suffers from mental illness, but I don't think I don't think that robs him of his capacity to know right from wrong.
From your point of view, is he insane?
That's not a question that makes sense to me as a professional. He suffers from a mental condition, but it doesn't deny him the...
Insane. You know what insane is, right?
Not the way you're asking it, no. It means something different to me.
What does it mean to you, doctor?
To me, insane is a layperson's attempt to disparage mental illness. So that's what that means to me. But if you're talking about what I responded to you, the second part.
Wait just a second.
Mhm.
You understand if somebody is insane, they will not be held criminally liable for committing a crime. You understand that? You understand that?
It's possible that's true.
Well, that's the law. So it's not a layman's disparagement, that's the law. So if this guy is insane, he would not be held criminally responsible. So do you think he's insane? Yes or no?
I think he suffers from a mental illness.
And many people do that.
There are a lot of people that do.
And a lot of people who have mental illnesses are not killing police officers.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
A lot of people who lack impulse control are not killing police officers.
That's true.
A lot of people who are highly intoxicated on Xanax are not killing police officers.
That's true too.
Would it be fair to say that if Brandon Daniel if he desires to follow the rules, he is able to follow rules?
Generally true.
When would it not be true?
If he has, I think it would be true if he was under a good deal of stress, if he hadn't slept properly, if he's had any alcohol or substances.
Are you familiar with the prison environment?
Luckily, I don't have any personal knowledge of it.
Have you had any work dealing with what the environment is like in a prison, the structure of a prison, what there is there that could be dangerous, what there is there that's available to prisoners? Are you familiar with any of that stuff?
Not with any depth of knowledge, no, sir.
You don't know what kind of controls would be on him in prison?
The only thing that I would assume is that he has a great deal of structure. In other words, there's pretty much, he's told when he needs to go to bed, when he wakes up in the morning, and what he does during the day. That would be my guess.
I'm not telling him what to do pretty much 24/7.
Or at least, not necessarily an individual, but certainly the structure of the environment would dictate his behavior.
If he's in that kind of structured environment, but he's not having access to alcohol and drugs, he should be able to control his impulses. Is that accurate?
I think relative to his peers, yes, I think so.
Would you say that if he did have access to alcohol and drugs in the prison environment, that might make him less likely to control his impulses?
I believe that's a true statement.
And he could become a dangerous person?
Under the influence, yes.
Could become dangerous and could commit acts of violence
I think that's a risk, yes.
in the prison?
If he's under the influence, yes, sir.
Anything that can be done to fix whatever problem he has, is there?
Well, depends on which problem we're referring to. He's currently taking 2 different antidepressants, and that seems to have helped him in terms of his mood.
Okay. The other problems?
I don't think so. I think the way that you deal with it, I think I talked a little bit about this yesterday, is that we have an environmentally contingent functionality. We have, with the structure and support in an environment, I think he can make adjustments to it and carve out a reasonable quality of life there.
Were you aware that at one time he was trying to use the use of Ambien as a defense?
The use of Ambien as a defense?
Trying to say that
In this case?
Yes, yes, sir.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't aware that he was trying to research how Ambien could be used as a defense in his killing of Jaime Padron?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Does that surprise you?
No.
Do you think that Brandon Daniels is a person who has empathy for other people?
I think he has a degree of empathy, might not be relative to the general population
So
as high as the average person, but I think he has the capacity to put himself in another person's place.
he has the capacity, he does have the capacity to put himself in another person's place.
I believe so.
Well, then he has empathy.
Yeah, part of, yes, I think that's to a degree. I think just like some of the other things that we've talked about, my response is going to be relative to the general population. In other words, I don't think his empathy is necessarily as good or as deep as some of his peers, and I don't mean in the jail, I meant just generally his age group. But I think he absolutely has a capacity.
If another defense witness, somebody on y'all's defense team, has described him as lacking empathy, would you disagree with that?
I would want to know the basis of their opinions, and I would consider what they have to say before I pass judgment on it. But at least in my interacting with Brandon and reviewing the things that I reviewed, including Facebook entries and that kind of thing, he was demonstrating through the course of that some empathy. And so the complete lack of capacity for that, I don't think I would agree with.
Did you see at any time any demonstration of remorse for killing Officer Jaime Padron?
I did not see that personally.
Would it be accurate to say, then, based on what you've seen, reviewing the record, that he lacked remorse?
There were certainly statements he made when he was intoxicated that would suggest a lack of remorse, a lack of understanding of what happened, what he did. I think that his behavior...
Sorry to interrupt that, but you said he didn't understand what he did? Is that what you said?
I'm not sure. Did I say that?
Yeah.
What I was saying is that when he is intoxicated, to the degree that he was intoxicated, understanding like you and I here in this courtroom, it's clear he didn't have that level of understanding.
You don't think he understood that he was killing a police officer?
I think after the fact he certainly understood it.
You think when he was doing it, he didn't understand he was killing a police officer?
I think we've entertained that question before, you and I.
You brought it up again. That was stunning to me that you seemed to think he didn't understand what he was doing. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that he was utterly intoxicated.
Got that.
We all agree with that. There's
So
no debate about that. And in the context of that, it is clear to me that he committed that impulsive act, that tragedy has occurred. His understanding of all of the consequence of all of that is not the same as he would even today in an unintoxicated state. So that's all I was trying to say, and I probably said it very inelegantly, and I certainly didn't mean to offend anybody.
After he killed that police officer, he didn't understand that the consequences could be the death penalty or life in prison?
I feel pretty clear he didn't reason through it that way.
But he did understand that he had killed a police officer, but he didn't understand it when he was doing it. Is that what you're saying? Afterwards, he knew it was a police officer he had killed, but when he was killing the police officer, he didn't know at that time.
No one would be able to say one way or the other whether he actually knew.
One person could say that, couldn't he?
I'm not sure he could.
But I'm sure he did, didn't he?
Sure he did what?
Say that he knew when he was doing it, he knew he was killing a police officer. That's what
He said a lot of things that day.
That's what he said. I mean, I understand you choose not to believe, but that's what he said, isn't it? You saw the interview.
I did.
And that's what he said repeatedly on the interview.
He did.
He knew it was a police officer there watching him while he was shoplifting.
Mhm.
He knew the police officer was going to, the police officer, uniform, badge-wearing police officer was going to try to stop him. And he pulled out a gun and he shot the person he knew was a police officer. That's what Brandon Daniel said, isn't it?
Yes.
But you think Brandon Daniel got that wrong. You think Brandon Daniel didn't know what he said he knew. Is that correct?
What I said was the testimony that he gave for hours after the event was inconsistent. It was unreliable. That's what I said. And I don't want to...
Do you know the first thing he said after he put a bullet in that police officer was, "I killed a cop"? Did you know that?
No, I do know that he passed out immediately afterwards.
Okay, I didn't ask you about it
Yeah,
last night.
okay.
So why don't you limit your answer to what I asked you about?
Yes, sir.
Did you know the first thing he said after he put a bullet in Officer Jaime Padron was, "I killed a cop"? Did you
Yes.
know that?
Yes.
Did you know that he said that several times on the way to the police station before the videotaped interview you watched? "I killed a cop."
Yes.
Do you know that he also said he knew the cop, had met him before?
Yes, but I don't believe that's factual.
Did you know that he said that he knew the officer who was driving the vehicle?
I think he said that, but again, I'm not certain that's factual.
So these two officers that he claimed to know immediately after, you think that he got that wrong? He didn't know these officers?
That's what I think.
I understand what you think. Do you believe you might be wrong about that?
Well, that's my opinion.
Well,
And anybody could be wrong.
all this has been your opinion. Is that fair to
All
say?
what?
All of this testimony you've given to the jurors about why he killed Jaime Padron, all that's your opinion, right?
Certainly.
And all of it could be wrong.
Well, sure. And we're all trying to make sense out of this. This is the way, from my point of view, with my background and experience and training, that's how I understand it.
That's what it's on.
Dr. Harrell, thanks for coming back today.
Mhm.
So one of the early areas of questioning had to do with your level of skepticism, specifically when you're talking to a person in the criminal context. But as a neuropsychologist, you always have to have a certain level of skepticism.
Absolutely.
Explain why to me.
What we're trying to do is take information from as many sources as possible. And there are limits to anybody's understanding of their own history, so we try to get collateral sources. And people can't always relate an accurate history. And so we basically try to get information from as many different places as we can.
And is our information perfect? Are we able to go back and see exactly what happened every time the person did anything?
Never perfect. It's never perfect.
So how do you piece together an accurate picture to be able to accurately do what you see?
We basically look at, does information point in a particular direction? Does all the information, is there convergent evidence of something? And in the absence of information all pointing in the right direction, we have to try to make sense out of it. But we're looking for a consistent pattern. We're looking for a story that tells itself, in a sense. And that's what I did here, too. I was looking for the story that told us what happened.
So you're not trying to spin together a bunch of disparate elements to weave together a story that exists, that you have to put things together in a way they don't fit together. You're saying these symptoms are all comorbid. There are studies that show these symptoms are all comorbid, and that's the story we see exactly in this case. Is that what you're telling the jury?
I think that is tragically
Can you
true.
explain that to the jury?
I'm not sure what you want me to explain.
You talked about the JAMA study.
Yes.
You read.
Yes.
The comorbid symptoms.
Yes.
Okay. What are those comorbid symptoms?
According to,
First of all, I'm sorry, what does comorbid mean?
just means it occurs with another disorder. It puts you at risk. For example, if you have diabetes, you're likely to get difficulty with peripheral vascular disease, and you can have comorbid conditions of hypertension and heart disease. So that's what I mean.
That doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other, one leads to the other, but they all typically exist in a group.
That's right.
Now, so with this frontal lobe disorder caused by traumatic brain injury, including concussions, what are the comorbid symptoms that study was done?
What that study and basically the whole field of mild traumatic brain injury, which unfortunately we're learning more and more about with our wounded veterans, that whole field shows a consistent pattern of depression, struggles with mood regulation, and impulsive behavior, specifically substance use and abuse. So those are the two most common, and as I indicated earlier, what we're finding is that the incidence of suicidality when those things occur is about 4 times that of the normal population.
So in Brandon Daniels' case, did you see evidence of those comorbid traits?
Yes.
Explain that to the jury.
He, from the reading of the record and from interviewing him, it seems to me pretty evident that he struggled with depression his entire life.
Okay, let me stop you with that. Number 1 comorbid trait, depression. When you first asked him about depression, did he say, yes, doctor, I'm depressed?
No,
Did he say, I really want you to tell the story to the jury about how depressed I am?
not at all.
They try to manipulate you into saying that he's depressed.
Absolutely not.
What
Quite
was
the
his
reverse.
response?
I'm not depressed. No, I'm fine.
Okay. How did you determine then that he really actually is depressed?
Partially by getting to know him, but asking around related symptoms, dealing with sleep regulation, energy level, other things that are symptoms of depression, without asking him directly about how he feels.
Okay. And how is that related to the other comorbid trait of suicide attempts? Are depression and suicide attempts related?
They are, and what makes it particularly deadly is if someone has depression and they have some difficulty with impulse control. It certainly raises the risk factor for suicidality.
Okay. And then impulse control, I think you testified earlier that you saw that's oftentimes related to the drug use. Is that correct?
Drug use and injury to the prefrontal cortex that you would expect when someone has multiple concussions.
Right. So are you saying here that because Brandon Daniel had a skateboard accident, he killed this police?
Absolutely not.
Are you saying that because Brandon Daniel is depressed, he killed the police?
Absolutely not.
Because he had frontal cortex impulse control issue, therefore he killed the police officer?
No.
Just because the person took Xanax, are you saying that's why the person killed the police officer?
No, sir.
Are you saying it's sort of the perfect storm? All those things came together in a terrible way, and that's why Brandon Daniel killed the police officer?
That's how I understand it. Yes, sir.
I think you had indicated, Mr. Cobb asked you a question about if a person is inclined to commit acts of violence, and they have an impulse control issue, then they might act on that inclination to commit acts of violence. You started to agree, but then you had another portion of your answer that you were not able to say. Can you recall what the rest of your answer was?
I think that whole idea, if you're impulsive and you take something that increases your impulsivity, that's a problem. But the other part of the equation is there are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type phenomena that's out there. There are some people who, in the absence of taking drugs or alcohol, would not be violent at all, but under the influence become basically a different person, but those things occurred as well.
So we've heard, I'm sure everyone's heard stories of people that are ugly drunks who are nice, have good personalities, but they're ugly drunk. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And so can you predict ahead of time exactly the effect a drug is going to have on a person? Say Xanax, a person takes a large dose.
No.
Why not?
For thousands of reasons, but there are so many things that would occur strictly on a biochemical basis. There's the individual and all the complexity of their own personalities, and it's the social situation that they're in. This is a multi-dimensional, multifactorial problem.
Let me turn that question around and ask them in a different direction. A person might try to argue that when you take a depressant like Xanax that lowers your inhibition, that really you're stripping away the inhibition, and the acts you take are the acts you really want to take. And they're the acts who really reflect who you are at your core. Is that
I think that's stretching it. I don't think that's true.
explain to the jury what your response is to that potential argument? If you can.
Well, it's a complex response. I don't want to get way out there, but when you take a drug like benzodiazepine, Xanax in particular, there are times when people actually act in an automatic fashion. You're interacting with them, you think there's really everything's okay, but they are extremely impulsive and they may do things that are completely outside their normal behavior. We all have impulses. We all process thousands of bits of data every second, and we react to it in a particular way, and we kind of rely on the integrity of those neural substrates that control our behavior to regulate all of that. So if you take alcohol, you take drugs, you've got an injury to that part of your brain, you will demonstrate behavior that you would absolutely not otherwise do.
So a person who is highly intoxicated might do something entirely and completely out of character.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last area for now. Are you aware if Brandon has received treatment in jail for his mental disorder?
Yes.
And what treatment?
He's currently, well, he's had a modest degree of psychotherapy, but the primary intervention has been through medication.
And that's antidepressant medication?
Yes, sir.
And is he taking multiple antidepressants?
He is. He's taking 2.
Does he appear to have, from the records you reviewed, does he appear to have responded well to those antidepressants?
He seems to have. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, we'll pass it to this.
No physical abuse in this case, correct? The defendant was not physically abused by his parents, correct?
I didn't see any evidence of that, no, sir.
Nor did you see any evidence of sexual abuse.
No,
There's no mental retardation issues here.
not at all.
Quite the opposite. Smartest person in the room?
Well,
Well, other than you, maybe.
he's a smart person.
I know, he's past smart. He's 132. That's all.
Well, he's about 2 standard deviations above the mean.
He never had to deal with issues like being homeless or not having food provided, a shelter, all that kind of stuff.
I don't believe so.
Certainly had educational opportunity and did quite well in school, didn't he?
Yes.
Graduated from Colorado State University with honors.
Yes.
In a field that's highly technical, he did very well.
Yes, sir.
Had a good job with a national company.
Yes.
Had no kind of work-related issues, did he?
No kind of what?
I'm sorry, no kind of work-related issues? He wasn't
No, I did
getting in trouble
not.
at the job. He
I
did his
did.
work quite well.
Yes, he did.
And just a month before this happened, he had received his latest promotion.
He did
You aware of
well.
that?
He did well in work.
So clearly at his work, he was able to control his impulses.
Yes.
I'm not going to get that when my phone is on. Apologies. So none of those kind of mitigating factors are present in this case, are they? Sexual abuse.
Oh, those are the ones you just asked me about? No, sir.
And although he committed numerous offenses as a juvenile, he never did time in the juvenile system, did he?
No.
His parents always responded appropriately when he got in trouble at school.
Oh, I think that's definitely not true.
Well, you obviously didn't look at the school records.
In the school records, they show that in response to the recommendation for receiving psychological care, the mother threatened to sue the school district.
Right.
So, yeah, I wouldn't think that that's an appropriate response.
But that was because they wanted to suspend him, not because they said he needed some psychological counsel.
Well, I didn't quite read it that same manner,
Not
but
surprised. That's what it said.
well, I don't really I didn't read it in quite the same way that you're inferring.
Would you agree that he did show an utter lack of remorse for killing Jaime Padron?
Coincidental with the event? Is that what you mean? Yes, I believe that's true.
And even 2 years later, he's shown an utter lack of remorse.
I can't say.
Well, you certainly can't say he's ever shown any remorse whatsoever.
That's true.
That's what we call an utter lack of remorse. That's what he's shown.
He hasn't demonstrated the remorse, no, sir.
You just don't want to say utter lack of remorse, is that what it is?
Why? I don't hold any belief that I can peer into his heart.
Did you know he planned to profit from this murder?
I heard a statement to that effect.
You found that disturbing?
Yes, I did.
Right. You know, that comes from him.
Yes.
So when you say you heard that statement, that's not something I'm making up.
No, that's right. That's correct.
One last thing I want to cover with you. This frontal lobe dysfunction, the symptoms for that, are they similar to someone who has personality disorders?
No. Although you can get, if it's severe enough, you can get what's referred to as a personality change related to brain injury.
So your answer is no?
Your Honor, the witness was in the middle of answering the question. And again, Mr. Cobb is trying to dictate whether it's yes or no.
It was a yes or no question? The
You may have
question
wanted
was
a yes or no question.
the
but
frontal lobe dysfunction symptoms similar to personality disorder symptoms.
I think I explained my response. If you didn't,
You said no.
but no, but as a clarifying statement, there is a diagnosis called personality change due to brain injury, and you can get that.
That was your answer?
Well, you looked away. I thought you were going to ask another question.
I thought you were talking to the jurors. I didn't know, because you had answered my question, so you were going on to explain.
Well, I basically.
I would ask the court to ask Mr. Cobb to stop with all
Are
this
there any more
sidebar.
questions for this witness?
In the case where you have frontal lobe dysfunction, is it possible you could confuse frontal lobe brain damage, a person having frontal lobe brain damage, with someone who is just basically a psychotic killer?
Well, a psychotic killer is not likely to have the history that Brandon has in particular, but they're not also likely to have difficulties with the capacity to smell.
Cocaine affect your capacity to smell?
It can, sure.
That's what.
I'm here where Mr. Cobb asked me if he agree with Mr. Daniel with his utter lack of remorse. Is that an area you even explore?
No,
So the two of y'all didn't talk about that at all?
no,
So it would be fair to say that he didn't tell you about it because you didn't talk about it.
that's true.
Sure, we'll pass it.
No questions?
No further questions. Then Ms. Dr. Harold is excused.
Thank you, you can accept that.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to recess for lunch. It's 12:45, I'd actually be back at 2:15.